define that the way you wish.
I'll put a paper bag over my head and sit in the corner.
We have Thomas online with us this morning and attendees.
Good morning, Thomas.
And we definitely, hi Thomas.
Hi, Ernie.
Anton, hi.
Nice shirt.
Oh, thank you.
It's a York Days.
York Days of.
We're in rare form.
Couldn't see
And
you
you
and I.
Yeah.
All right,
I just
welcome to
assumed that
the,
you stranded into York, town and train.
good morning, everyone. Let's get started with our October version or addition to the Sustainability Committee. We do have a quorum, so it's nice to see everybody. We are missing
Just wrong.
Ron is.
Ron.
He's in Australia, I believe, so
Oh,
I'm very jealous.
I'm
of
not
him.
feeling too.
He won't be calling you.
He will not be calling
So
you.
he had to leave the country, is that it?
He's forced out.
Hey, we said best behavior.
So given, we did have a meeting last month at the library, if you all recall, and had a nice discussion with those folks. Jamie sent out minutes to that meeting. Do we have any motion to accept those minutes? We have a move by Deb and seconded by Rick. Nobody else is doing it. Are there any comments about those minutes? Any additions, deletions, concerns?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for doing that. Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote?
Sure. We'll start online first, Thomas.
Approve.
Thank you. Ernie,
Approved.
Anton,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
David.
I wasn't here, abstaining.
Okay.
And we now have Angela as an attendee.
Yeah, I'm trying to get her up as a panelist. Sometimes
Hey,
it takes me a
Angela.
couple attempts, or maybe she hasn't accepted that I've invited her as a panelist yet.
Maybe she wants to be stealth.
That's not very like Angela.
Oh, we have, okay, now she is.
That's a pretty picture. That's the Scarborough Marsh.
Yeah, just listening in. Eavesdropping.
Okay.
We don't mind.
Feel free to chime in anytime.
All right.
First item of business is the joint memo and a report out from the council workshop that was held last week.
Yeah. I'll just start the conversation by saying that it was nice that they invited us for a workshop. I think that is a step in the right direction, and they obviously read the memo and had some thoughts about it and wanted to learn more. And I think I took away from that workshop, although I was a little late and there was a lot of, we diverged in different sections and not really focused on how could the process of this memo actually be implemented. But I think that I walked away with the idea that, yes, we can start that conversation. And it can be done in several ways. It can be done through ordinance updates, policy decisions from development through the council, and an open forum and allow participation from our stakeholders. So I walked away feeling like even though the amendment kind of took the initial bite of the apple out that we were trying to do, I don't think it's going to die. I think we're going to have a continued conversation of how can we do better or be different with our growth as we move forward. That's my take.
So
Deb?
of the 4 items on the list, and I bring my computer with me, so I don't have it in front of me. We're working on an ordinance for the EV chargers part. What was our second piece?
Passive house standards.
And that we can't do because of universal building code.
No, we can't enforce a code more than what MUBEC is. But there have been municipalities now that have begun to look at their ordinances and have been able to do ordinance changes that aren't considered code.
Okay, so.
So we
this is
can't
the
go to
weasel-
another code
This
version.
is the weasel room
Yes.
between, so what I was pitching a fit about, and this is that you've all heard me pitch, so I'll just reiterate my fit for once, is that for 10 years, we have started working on an ordinance and been told we can't do this as an ordinance because of the Universal Building Code, and that we have to do this as exchanges when people ask for waivers or whatever. And then as soon as there's an opportunity to do some sort of an exchange and somebody's asked for a waiver, they're like, no, we can't do that right now because either it was way too fast or because that's not what they want to do or because that's not what they're willing to do. That has to be done in ordinance. And then we start working on an ordinance, they say, oh, no, that can be done as an ordinance. You need to do that as an exchange. And they're like, wait, no, we can't do this as an exchange. And so for 10 years, we've gone back and forth that way. And so I was thinking as I left, like, we are working on this ordinance for the charger piece. And so that's a place. And what you're saying then is that we could write an ordinance that says new construction has to be up to passive house standards.
We can incorporate building standards in an ordinance. We have them now.
I guess I don't understand.
Because that's not a code. It's not a code. We can't, the MUBEC law says that you can't, the MUBEC code is the 2015 right now with a stretch code of 2021.
And how do we do the stretch code piece?
I'm not sure the fire marshal ever did that the right way. There was rulemaking, but there was never a vote. But everybody's under the assumption that the 2021 is the stretch code.
But what does it mean to be a stretch?
It means that it
You
is
can
not the
adopt that
base code.
Instead of the 2015.
Right.
So is that something that we should be pressing for? As the
I don't think we need to waste any energy on that because MUBEC is actually looking at going to the 2021 code.
That was going to be my question is, do you know the status of
Yeah,
that?
it's moving forward. They're doing the tag meetings on some of the chapters of the MUBEC law. And what that does is just, MUBEC has the authority to remove provisions in the code if they so choose. For an example, the sprinklers in single-family homes, it's a requirement in code, but they have taken that out of the code.
So it's not in me.
Unless you're certain amount from a water supply.
Okay.
So they,
I followed that squirrel. That's gonna happen.
but now we don't know what the stretch code is gonna be.
Oh, but we could identify items from standards and we could write an ordinance.
We could put it in our building,
Family homes in Scarborough must be built with our 807 insulation or whatever it is that we
yeah.
picked, or they must have
It would go into,
windows.
it's not, I don't know as if we can legally put a certain standard on, but we could do a threshold. Meaning we can't use the word passive house, I don't think.
Okay, but I was talking about choosing items.
From there,
that
we
standard.
could say in our
All
building
of them
standard,
or
just
some
like
of
we
them.
go down in the beach, down in Pine Point, you have to build a building that looks something like this. And it's all spelled out.
And we can do that then for these construction methods pieces. Really?
As long as we don't call it a code. And that's why you work it through the ordinance.
Well, how fun is that? Gosh, I wish we'd done this earlier. Okay. So I think that we should put on our agenda a review of, like, item by item review of passive house standards and probably LEED certification as well. And we should develop an ordinance for, I don't know if it would be separate or how we want to think about it, but for single family residential, for multifamily residential, and for commercial construction that addresses these energy and sustainability.
I think the one thing that we have to look at on the legal side of things is there an opt-out clause? Because I think that's what's gonna keep us from getting in trouble if they were to challenge it.
Well, that could fund the sustainability fund,
Well,
potentially,
yeah,
if they want
good.
to opt out of the sustainable.
Then you can use it like a
Building
street,
standards.
do complete street somewhere, or not use it for that purpose, but under the same concept.
But we could use it for incentivizing retrofit. So
We could use it to do
for-
something like if they do
The
a consolidated school and we could load up with PV on top and you could use that money to put PV so it self-generates and that's kind of, absolutely.
Right, or like, because I still have on the list, I want us to have a presentation from South Portland on their electrify everything, or at least we need to read, but I'm necessarily.
It's not, it doesn't have a lot of key.
Yeah, but let's.
Well,
read
and
it.
it's an incentive base, so I have a little
They
bit of
only have
information with it.
$50,000 to go for. It's-
But we have zero, so, and we don't have, like, with zero, we can't put signs up and tell people they could apply for a rebate.
Yeah, they got that money too because of the MJRP.
Yeah, it's-
Jobs, well, from the ARPA
It's
that
ARPA
came to the state and then the state was told they have to divvy it up on, like Scarborough got some money direct.
Yeah,
So there's certain provisions that they have to do with that. They chose to take $50,000, I believe. And what they're doing is they're just layering on top for homeowners the efficiency main incentive, and then they're layering more on.
excellent,
Yeah, if we,
it just gives them a chance.
there's pros
to
and
put-
cons to that.
It just gives them a chance to put out another set of signs.
Well,
and
yeah, I
some
think
advertising.
It's
being
yeah,
local
it's
and us.
like promotion and
Yeah.
marketing of,
Mhm.
and getting people thinking about these
Yeah.
different things. I know that they haven't had a whole lot of people taking advantage of it yet, but it is still very new.
Yeah, okay. So I got myself distracted again. I would love for us to go through those, to think about what we would like to put in ordinance, maybe prioritize things.
Well, we can
Yeah.
set that as like an assignment for next meeting, if everybody wants to take a portion of.
Well, can we just add a thought, maybe getting Autumn and planning up here, because they're the ones that are innately intimate with the ordinances, and even Angela, and have them come to us, to our meeting, and kind of say, here are some areas that we should be focusing, which ordinances should we be focusing on? Like, does some of this go into site plan, or are they performance standards, or what have you? So I think maybe a little education on ordinances, Scarborough's ordinances, and how we could bring in the comp plan and update the ordinance, because I think that's where we have all the teeth in the world, because this comp plan is approved by the state. And so the state's,
That's why we had tried to slow down the downs, was to get this stuff to catch up.
yeah,
but
but
then we decided
the
not to
comp
after
plan
all.
wasn't approved before. They initially rolled out the downs with the old comp plan. And
Right.
the new comp plan came halfway in
Right,
to the period,
but
so.
still.
So I think that might be a better way to go, to get a little education on our side. You know, I know there's, in the site plan, there's some lighting, be updated, so we don't have to fight with these big box stores coming in here saying, no, I'm not gonna do something when our ordinance says, thou shalt do this.
Can I ask a question that I should know? Have you guys gone through what the long range planners kind of divvied up from the comp plan as tasks for committees? And was any of this in that?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at it in a little bit, so I know I was really focused on it for Conservation Commission.
Yeah,
I think that what this group had been working on had already aligned with that, so we didn't really take too much time to
okay.
look at that stuff, but I can get that out to you all.
That would be good, thanks. Good
I was
question.
just thinking, the reason I was thinking of it when you're talking about bringing in Autumn, I know that's been her focus, and she's actually been putting a lot of ordinance changes through long range planning and the ordinance committee actually pretty quickly lately, because she's pretty laser focused on kind of those tasks coming out of the comp plan, and how those got divvied up through the committees, and then kind of just trying to push kind of a lot of that forward to implement the comp plan. So I just was curious if you could use that, if there's a task in there that you can kind of prioritize and focus and get the planners kind of advocating and kind of pushing something through more quickly. But I wasn't sure if any of the code stuff was part of that.
Yeah, not so much the code stuff, and I can't even remember if like modern building stock was even mentioned.
That's what I mean.
in
Yeah,
our-
right.
But energy efficiency certainly was, and so it's.
And
Okay.
building standards
Yeah,
were
and-
definitely in the
Yeah,
comp
they
plan.
did recommend.
Well, that's what I was
standards
wondering.
and things like that.
And that's where maybe you could focus it on that way, is kind of like, this is your kind of responding to that also. And then have the planners kind of work with you to kind of move that forward.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
that works.
Yeah. Okay, so you'll send that out. Can you just send, I'm sure to find them, but links to the lead standards.
Yeah. Yeah, and pass the
Pass
house.
it up as well.
Yeah, let's, my personal preference would be to slowly migrate away from leads.
Well,
Since-
there's- I just
Slowly
wanna read,
migrate away from what?
From lead standard.
I just want to read through them and see if there are aspects in there that we would want to capture.
And there are
That's all.
some things that
Yeah.
we already are in our ordinances, like bike racks and gathering spaces that, have native shade trees and those kind of things.
That's a reminder that the thing that came up at the meeting was for transportation. Do you work with transportation?
Angela does more so than me.
Okay, and so Angela, one of the things on the memo was about contiguous bike paths. And council seemed interested in having somebody evaluate the current status of bike paths and make a plan for contiguous bike paths, which seems like a transportation committee task rather than a sustainability committee task.
Yeah, and transportation is in the process of working on a comprehensive transportation study for Scarborough that will likely have some bike ped component to it, and identifying what they're calling bike byways. So basically getting from kind of service areas in Scarborough, between service areas and neighborhoods and things like that. So
Perfect.
identifying those bike
Okay.
routes.
All right, so just want to make sure that was on somebody's radar.
Yeah.
To get lost. But-
Yeah, we talked about, we had transportation committee last night and talked about that as one of the deliverables we're hoping to get out of our study, the transportation study. And it kind of actually piggybacks on community services is doing a facilities master plan, which is due in December, a draft. It does not include trails, but it includes kind of like some of those destinations, right? The parks and the amenities around the parks is part of what we're connecting to, as well as, like, you know what I mean, the commercial centers. And so that's all part of it. And then we were also talking about how we include maybe the Conservation Commission, because they are very interested in it. And obviously having more advocates for that connectivity of trails is always good. And so transportation is talking about adding a subcommittee just to focus on that alone.
Hey, I'm very interested in that as well. And I think there's a quality and design issue. You could call something a bike path, and it's actually a glorified shoulder on the road, where you don't have any distance between, the oncoming traffic or the highway traffic and you as a pedestrian. And it's pretty scary sometimes that, a runner bike and on the streets, they're just, even if they have it designated as a bike path. In South Portland and in Portland, they have actually separators. So they have the bike path, the road, and then there's like a 3-foot section where there's 2 solid lines that separate the two. And that's at a minimum, helpful. And so when people say we have bike paths, are they really usable? Is there a strong camber, which is another issue? I think main roads, because of snow and ice, we have that arc,
The crown.
the crown, for runoff. And it's so, it serves a purpose, but it also makes it very difficult to run sometimes. And
Portland could do it right on Park Street by Payson Park. They now have the green travel way
Yeah.
and underneath the bridge and everything.
Yeah.
And that's pretty traffic area.
Yeah.
And if they can do it, why can't
Right.
Scarborough?
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw out there, one of the concerns is kind of that push and pull imbalance, because most of our main roadways, collectors, arterials are right through wetlands. And so you're kind of balancing between adding another 10 feet of pavement or preserving some natural resources. So that's kind of the tricky part through Scarborough. And I mean, there's some areas that are easier than others, and some that just are difficult to permit. And then also talking about, do we want to permit? Because we're prioritizing the Scarborough Marsh and things like that. So it gets a little tricky. And that's where you go back to maybe through the woods, through the trails. There's other ways to connect, not just on the roadways. And I think we take advantage of both and try to find paths between, like we said, destinations that that take advantage of all of the opportunities we have.
Well, is there a mapping of these small trails between neighborhoods? Like I'm up in Pleasant Hill and there are several distinct neighborhoods with separate entrances, but there are connector trails between them in several places that I've never understood if they're maintained by whom.
But it's a variety. We do have them on GIS. We don't have all of them. And that's another piece that, like I said, we talked about transportation, about working with community services and kind of developing that through the study. But as far as who owns and maintains them, it's a variety. It's land trust, it's homeowners associations, it's the town. So it depends. All of the above.
Connect. That's, I think, the biggest issue is that they are all little islands that each island isn't really sufficient for any kind of physical activity. They're a half mile or a mile, you know, I mean, they're nice for a little stroll if you're, you know, that's all you want to do. But if you want to try to get, you know, some real exercises, there's not enough.
Yeah.
And like I said, Broad Turn Farm, beautiful space. You know, if they had something that went around the periphery of that and connected to Fuller Farm. I mean, Fuller Farm is, you know, a nice space all to itself. They're not that far geographically, I don't know, half mile. And there's lots of woodland between. I don't know who owns it, but that, you know, connecting that and then Fuller Farm connecting to, there's a space down Saratoga off of Broad Turn. And, you know, that's brand new. They just put in some parking spaces there. That goes down to Payne Road. Now, if you can connect Payne Road to the Downs through, you know, those off-road places, then you're talking about actually, you know, giving people an opportunity to get to places without getting on the road.
Yeah.
But
And are the beaches a part of that as well, Angela?
Beaches.
The beach is a part of that planning?
Connecting the beaches or getting.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to hit mute, my mute off. Yeah, so the destinations include parks and municipal services and commercials, developments, things like that.
That would be so cool, the beach. I was down in Hilton Head Island for a week, rented bicycles. Every day we biked to the beach.
Yeah.
nice.
And, you know, they had places for bicycles.
Yeah.
And it was so nice. Never drove the car the whole week we were there.
And we're like a mile from
Can-
Higgins Beach, but there's not
Not a
safe way to
connection.
ride a bike there.
Yeah.
Pleasant Hill on that end is just, it twists and it's very narrow.
Yeah, I've run from Scarborough Beach and Prounce Neck over to Higgins Beach. And you're taking your life in your hands going on.
Yeah,
the
you
sunset.
are.
I did it one
Oh my
time.
gosh, yeah, no, they're coming at really fast, there's no shoulder.
Gotta be in
You know.
shape to go to Pine Point from my house. That's
Okay, well, we'll leave that to
That's great.
transportation. We're
No, I
glad
think that's
something's
all in the
on there.
right direction. Boy, I like this
I like
energy.
that too.
So for next steps for this, I will send out the items that the Long Range Planning Committee had identified were related to the Sustainability Committee, and provide you with links for the standards for Passive House and LEED certification. And talk to Autumn about perhaps coming to a future meeting to talk about kind of what's currently in our ordinances or where some of these ideas may fit into our ordinances in areas where this group.
And send the group the link to the site plan
Yep.
ordinance, the chapter of the, for site planning, because I think there's some good provisions in there that we might be able to take a look at.
And then let's fast track this charter ordinance.
Well, it's going as fast as it can.
Yeah, I mean, that's our next item on the agenda. So if we are ready to move on, we can jump into EV charging. So we are the ordinance is going back before the ordinance committee tomorrow. And hopefully at that point, they will decide to move it on to council for their review. So
Do they need anything from us? They wanted stuff from.
they wanted stuff from Autumn. They basically wanted Autumn to take a look at our existing parking standards and to make sure that there are not going to be any conflicts. And they cited kind of restaurant parking as their primary concern. And again, restaurants aren't required to put in EV chargers. They're just required to put in the conduit. So at a later date, when the market drives that they need EV chargers, it will be easy for them to install them. And
Jumping in there, the other thing that came up in the council workshop, when I walked in, they were talking about concerns about multifamily housing and where could we get chargers. And remember, there was a conversation with revision that it would be
Right.
possible to have movable
Right.
chargers,
yeah,
like the charger has to be somewhere.
yeah, as long as the
But if
infrastructure
all
is
of
at the
the-
space, the
But
charger
if
can be moved.
right, but if the infrastructure is in place.
Yeah.
If we need the charger to be at unit 7.
And our ordinance does not really take into account how the parking management is done by these places.
Right,
Right,
If they so choose to want to have reserved parks, that's up to the management of that. But it should have no bearing on the ordinance that we're trying to do. Let them deal with that.
and then in terms of costs, there's, if they want to recoup some of that cost for the EV charging, there's lots of different models out there. They can have the network and meters. so that
Absolutely.
people are paying as they charge. If there's a dedicated spot for a tenant, they can have kind of an EV surcharge or something as part of their lease where they are recouping some of that electrical costs. There's lots of different models out there. So Autumn went through
I
and
just want folks to have that answer for next time it comes up, because it will come up.
yeah, it certainly will. So Autumn did go through the ordinance language and our parking standards, found no conflicts. The one thing she is saying is that we probably do at some point want to look at the restaurant parking standards, but not because of EV, just because it's a hard thing to kind of have a formula for, since you don't know how many seats are at each table and things like that. So it is kind of more ambiguous than, you know, a hotel that has X number of rooms and you assume one space per room. So, you know, she did put that out there as a recommendation because Nonsuch River does keep coming up as there's no parking. And talking with Angela about that specific site, the planning board said you don't have enough parking, but they met the standard. And so it moved through the process. So, you know, parking for restaurants probably should be looked at, but not because of this ordinance, just in general, it should be looked at. But otherwise, it's not really gonna have that much of an effect unless you're a large commercial retail sales or service center like Costco, or a fitness center, and for multifamily housing, it will have an impact there. And single family,
Yeah.
yes, it will have to be EV ready, but not have chargers.
And so do they need anything else from us? Do we need to be there?
Not that I know of at this point. I think it was helpful to have you both there for the first meeting. We're just going to be going over kind of Autumn's analysis tomorrow. Like I said,
You'll be there?
I'll be there. Yeah, and
I think that'll
hopefully-
have a lot of teeth with the ordinance committee.
And hopefully they will move that through the council, and then once it gets on council's agenda, it would probably be helpful, at least to have you all in the room supporting that, whether you get up and speak to it or not, or a representative from the committee should get up and speak to it. But it is helpful to have, you know, supporters in front of the council when that time comes.
Has this had public comment on it?
So not officially, I mean, people can come and speak to it
Yeah,
at the ordinance.
But
committee.
it's never been before the council for public comment.
No,
Well, when we did the
There
workshop,
was a
I think
workshop,
John took public comment at the workshop.
Okay, but we'll have to have a public comment again?
there will be.
Yeah,
public
on
hearing.
the specific ordinance itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there will be public hearing both at council and at planning board.
Yeah.
So this will have to go before.
But yeah, it will have to go to planning board,
Yeah.
and I hope I don't screw up like I did with the solar. Oh, that
We're
was,
counting on you.
yeah, I didn't think I screwed up, I just didn't think people did their homework.
Jamie, does the residential EV requirement apply to additions and modifications?
It doesn't, and maybe that's something we should talk about, whether if they're adding a garage, if there's electricity going to the garage,
Yeah, they should.
they should at least plan for, EV charging in their garage.
Right. So, but doesn't the ordinance?
But does a
I wish I
homeowner
read it.
have to go to, they only go to code
Yeah,
through that. They don't go to planning board for that.
well, and they don't go, if it's just one single family home, they don't go to planning board either, that just goes through code enforcement as well.
So they're,
Code enforcement do anything with ordinances or just code?
So
I think they're just code.
there's, well, Angela may be able to answer this better than I can. They do need to, like, make sure, it might be something that we have to add to like their checklist or something as they're reviewing, plans.
I guess, yeah, because you have certain setbacks and everything. If you wanted to do an addition, you've got to be certain setbacks from an abutter's property line.
Yeah.
So those are some things
Yeah.
that are part of the ordinance that I guess plan era
Yeah.
code would have to do that.
Yeah, our zoning administrator is definitely looking at our zoning ordinance, in the sections that apply to, single family.
Yeah, so that would be a part of a zoning ordinance.
Yeah, this is
On-
part of chapter 405.
Okay.
And so we could add.
I guess I couldn't really hear Deb's question. I was just hearing your responses. So if it's not part of a subdivision, chapter 405 is not triggered. I think single family houses are exempt from chapter 405.
Angela, so what about like for setbacks and things like that? If, for an existing single family home that comes
That's in the zoning. So that would be in the zoning. So like every zoning district has those standards of frontage and setbacks and those type of things. So those things are not part of 405. They're part of the actual zoning itself, the district.
So what is the mechanism for, like, this ordinance that would require a single family home to wire the garage for an EV charger?
It would only capture subdivision possibly in the subdivision ordinance where, someone's breaking out and doing 20 lot subdivision and they're building the single family houses within it might be the mechanism. I don't know. The one-off lots, I'm not quite sure how you would capture those.
I think the question is, if you have a single family home and they're wishing to put an addition onto that.
Yeah.
It have to be looked at in the ordinance to ensure that it's got the frontage and all of that kind of stuff. But is there something that has an ability to have a write-in about an EV charger if they add a garage to a existing home?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an easy fit. I'm not saying you can't add that but it would go into the zoning. So it would be required for everybody in the zone, not under a performance standard under chapter 405. It would be like literally like
Okay.
in the RF zone, you have this setback and this frontage and expansion of more than 20% of your home constitutes this. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it's worded. And so you'd have to look at it that way. And I would definitely recommend that Brian Longstaff maybe chime in because he has to uphold that code, or the zoning piece of it. And he might see pros and cons that we're not, seeing coming.
Does this mean we need to rewrite what we're doing or?
No, it would
No.
be a second step. It would be another process.
It just doesn't become part of a site plan because single family homes are exempt. But if you go for a subdivision, then we just got all new houses and we could probably do stuff in there within the site plan ordinance to say that you build a single family home, you have to put a charger in.
So we want that and we want it for an added garage and you'll work with the people in the office.
I'll talk to Brian about how to potentially incorporate that. Again, that would be another full process with the
Right,
the
so
council.
we're not gonna capture it right now.
Right.
So you're looking
Right,
at
if your
2024.
Yeah, if your priority is new development, that's kind of.
Yeah,
you know.
that's a little bit
Let's
easier
not
to go.
forget this piece and bring it along, but,
Right.
you know, if the purpose was to tackle.
New
that,
construction.
yeah.
Yeah, any new construction, and that's, I
Growth.
think, that is the biggest bite of the apple at this point. I think, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
the additions and things like that, that I don't think there's a whole lot of that happening.
I installed an EV charger for a neighbor down the street. He doesn't have a garage, but he put one out on a pedestal
Mhm.
because he was using the standard charger with some made, even put a 50 amp circuit in for him, so like that.
Yeah.
3
Alright.
miles an hour.
So that goes to ordinance tomorrow.
Ordinance tomorrow, and I will give you an update after that, to know kind of what the next steps are. Assuming they move it forward, it would go to council, and at this point, I would assume it would be on the second, council agenda in November if they move it forward.
Okay.
Should we plan on a certain number of us being there? Pretty scant.
It's hard to plan.
Yeah,
I think it's, you know,
Or, I don't mean
try
plan,
and
but
be,
encourage each other to go instead of it's Deb and me sitting there.
yeah, I think it is helpful though for the council to see someone other than me there, either speaking in support of this or at least there to show their support for it.
And I think that given that you and I have been at several of these, I think it just makes sense for us to continue to be the face of that. And if others are able to get there, I think that's perfectly fine. But I'm willing to continue to be the face. And part of that is EV drivers continuing to be the face, like,
True.
don't.
I'll be your biggest cheerleader when it comes to planning.
Okay, thank you. All right,
So, all right, I will keep you updated on that. Next item is quick update on utility scale solar ordinance. The council did approve the amendment at their October 5th meeting, so that's all in place. It is in effect as soon as it was approved. So we did have an application for a solar array that was tabled because it didn't meet the forestry standards, come back. They still have some work to do, so it's not going before planning board at their next meeting. They need some additional work basically on the site around the solar array. Like, how are you getting the equipment there? You're gonna have to build roads. We want to see what those roads look like and how they're sized and what your erosion controls are and things like that. So that one I think will probably be before planning by the end of the year. It's just my guess. And then we also have an array. I was out yesterday. There's one off at the end of Johnson Road, which is off of West Beach Ridge Road. And it looks awesome. They're going great guns on that. And
Oh, that's the one, yeah. Is that the one? No, that's not the one the school's getting their energy from.
no,
That's
that
on the
one's Kimberly
landfill.
Clark. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Kimberly
yeah,
Clark landfill.
was
Yeah,
the
I'm
name
not
of that?
sure who's getting the offtake from the one out off of Beach Ridge, but I went out with our inspector just to check on the erosion controls and all of that, and I would say it's probably at least a third, if not half, constructed, and the site looked really good, especially after having all the rain that we've gotten lately. And that was the site
Awesome.
where they didn't have to do any site work. It was a big wide open field. And so because they didn't have to do any site work, they are running more three-phase, or they went a farther distance to run three-phase power out to their site.
Have you ever been on 114 going toward Gorham or past downtown Gorham? There's this big solar right in the thing, and you could see the 3 telephone poles that they had to put in with the breaker
Mhm.
system on it, and now it's even 3-phase grid. Just beautiful. And it's unused land, and it'll never have a home development on it.
Or at least not for 50
And they're
years.
getting power where we need it, okay? And now we take that the next step and you start electrifying all your buildings. This is where Maine's going.
we're on our way. Okay, good. So that happened
Mhm.
and that array is moving forward.
Mhm.
Are there any other actions that we should be taking on solar for municipal stuff
So
or other alternatives?
So that is, I don't know what's happening like with the schools. I know they are taking off some, or they are getting the offtake from the Kimberly Clark array when that one is up and running. there are always opportunities to look for, you know, rooftop solar and things like that in town.
I think one thing we could do as a committee is wrap ourselves around the infrastructure bill and the tax credits that are coming out for homeowners for these kind of things, and start doing an education piece for homeowners.
That's a good idea.
Because there's a lot of money for solar and heat pumps in this infrastructure bill.
And what's the timeline on that?
Well, I think January is when they become effective. The tax credit for heat pumps, I think is January. And I think it's up to $1,200. So I think we should do a little bit, and I'll help with that because we're doing that on the other side. Because this is a big deal. Because we're trying to align things, because you couple it with some financial incentives that are offered at the state level and with the tax credit at the federal level. And this applies to EVs too. Big money in EVs.
Right.
And so, and it's equitable. And when we talk about not equality, but equity,
Right.
two different, very different things. And I'd like to think that we could educate the public on this a little bit, that subject, as we start moving into providing information for our residents.
And with the EV rebates, there are like income limitations and things like that. Do you know? if
Moderate to low income thresholds and different rebates for, again, equity is more important than equality here.
And so do you know if there will be similar income tiers and things like that for the solar credits and?
I don't know. That's why I think we got to check. And that's why we're also checking on the other side, because we want to get this right so that we can be, telling people the right thing. But I just think this committee should take whatever education we can get and pass it on to our residents.
And
People need
maybe
to know
offer,
where to start.
Yeah,
and maybe offer a workshop or a webinar or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Probably a webinar.
yeah. Is Efficiency Maine offering any?
We're doing the investigation pretty thick. I mean, we have one guy that's all he's practically doing now is trying to figure out how all of this is timed, what are the limitations and all of that, because it's pretty significant.
Mhm.
And we've proven heat pumps in Maine work, so, dynamite. And then get the solar on there, these houses don't need to be tethered.
So, and the library's been doing, trying to do a sustainable Scarborough series. So they're talking about, they offer like webinars and workshops with all of these types of things. So once we have a handle on what it all looks like and what the requirements and qualifications are, we could possibly work with the library and
Absolutely.
Efficiency Maine to do.
I know Efficiency Maine did something for homeowners on weatherization and stuff, and did it through community services and that kind of thing. But I think that's something that this committee can be doing.
Agreed. And that just puts the local label on.
Right,
Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, good.
That ties in nicely to our new business item, which is taking a look at the local Electrify campaign. So Chuck Spanger from the Conservation Commission had sent Deb a link about an Electrify Freeport event that they held up in Freeport last month, I think, which was kind of like a day-long event with different workshops and seminars about all things related to sustainability and electrification. So EV charging and solar and heat pumps and all of that. He was hoping that we could look to host a similar event in Scarborough. And then also Portland and South Portland both have their Electrify Everything campaigns, which are offering rebates for local rebates that, like you were saying, pair with the state rebates on a number of different types of things. I was talking with the sustainability director in South Portland a couple weeks ago, and she said that they've had a few people take advantage of it. One person got an electric lawnmower, and someone else, I think, was installing heat pumps and things like that and working through their rebate process.
It'll take time for people to make decisions about what they want to do.
Yeah.
Sure.
To move forward with that. So it's not surprising it's a slow start.
Yeah,
Let's keep an eye on that.
yeah, and then
What are
just,
we using our infrastructure money for?
so you mean the
The allotment that this,
ARPA funds, so it's, that's actually not infrastructure money, it's the American Recovery Act.
Okay.
Right.
And so some of it went for, I think, additional fund in April, you probably know more so than I do, since it was the council that drove that. But I think some of it went to additional funding for first responders who worked all through the pandemic.
Yeah.
I can't remember some of the other ones.
Either off the top of my head, but I can track.
That's
Yeah.
fine. Is there municipal infrastructure money coming? Do you?
I don't think it comes at the municipal level.
Yeah, so it's not being direct funded. There are grant opportunities. And so we actually, the town applied for an infrastructure adaptation grant to do a design for a couple culverts that are undersized and affecting upstream septic systems.
Are there energy grants that we should use?
You got one from GoPIF too, right?
Yeah, so-
For the Cape Elizabeth.
No, that was, that's something different. So, yeah, so our GoPIF funding, so that was our community action grant, is for the Route 1 Scarborough Marsh. crossing.
That's right.
Yeah, and we did work with Cape Elizabeth to apply for a big grant through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation
Oh,
to
that's-
look at Sawyer Street and Sawyer Road on the border of Scarborough and Cape Elizabeth.
I just want to make sure we're not missing some other opportunities.
So I think that there may be other opportunities coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, because that was very focused on EVs and energy efficiency things, but that one is so new that not a lot of.
Right, and
guidance has come out yet.
there's FOAs being generated, developed right now from different agencies within the federal government.
Mhm.
I know Efficiency Maine is working with the governor's office and the Department of Education to go after additional funding for school renovations to work on ventilation, HVAC in schools.
Mhm.
And Efficiency Maine recently launched through the main jobs funding, school funding opportunity notice that really elevated incentives for schools right now that belong to a conglomerate of towns. The idea was these smaller towns didn't get a cut of that money, the ARPA money, directly. So the state used some of the money, gave it to Efficiency Maine, and now they're putting it out for schools, and small municipalities
Yeah, I
have
was gonna say,
the same thing. They just rolled out for long-term care facilities. So like the hospice in Scarborough would be eligible to put in a VRF system and replace their
their
system,
current
heating and cooling system.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there are opportunities for municipalities and schools right now, but we don't qualify for them.
Okay.
It wasn't
We're-
because I didn't want to thank you, but I couldn't.
We're too big.
I actually launched those, and we was at the MMA conference when we launched it, and I was Maine Healthcare. I'm actually at the school management at the end of this week up in Augusta, trying to convince them that superintendents, you need to update your systems. So it's all using the Fed money.
And so the other thing that, that I'm kind of monitoring and hope to do some outreach to with our schools is electric buses. So Deb went to the demonstration, at the end of last month, where they brought in an EV bus, and we got to sit at a construction site for a good 20 minutes waiting to move when we rode on the EV bus.
Was it smooth?
It was very quiet, and I mean, it was like riding a bus, like anything else.
That was my kid's first, I sent a photo to my son.
There was a nice piece on just yesterday, wasn't it? That, what was it, the Camden School or some?
Mount Desert Island.
Mount Desert Isle. They had a bus driver who was apprehensive about having an electric bus, and he was driving. He says he loves it.
Yeah.
And my dream is, because I interviewed with Sarah, because I want to be a bus driver when I retire pretty soon. And I want to drive an electric bus in Scarborough. That would be my
So-
dream.
Yarmouth is getting 2 electric buses this fall. So the feedback from our local school department is that they were fairly early adopters of propane buses, and that did not go well.
I was gonna say, they are gonna have a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah,
Just
because
have
of,
their baggage about going to those propane buses.
Yeah.
so I'm hoping
Gonna be
that
more
we
tiny
can
if I
start those conversations, and that they can maybe talk with your peers from
Yeah.
municipalities close by that have had this experience, to see what it's been like because there is money out there right now too, to help offset the higher cost of an electric bus versus
Yeah.
a diesel powered bus.
Yeah, and I guess they're pretty slick. And even the propane, and Portland runs a lot of natural gas buses. But again, they're not carbon free.
Right.
So,
And the person that was doing the demo was sharing some of his experience, working in different school districts all around the country. And he was saying, because they save so much money using electric buses, for the bus drivers who were apprehensive of driving an electric bus, they actually pay them like $5 an hour more to drive an EV.
that's an interesting way to
Because
do it.
there's so much cost savings between an electric bus and a diesel powered bus. So.
We'll have to pay the.
And then they were, because there are like so many monitoring systems on there, they have like monthly competitions with the drivers who drive them, and whoever can get like the most efficient runs and have the most regenerative braking and all of that.
Doesn't
Then,
use the heated steering wheel?
yeah, right.
They
Then,
did say that they use diesel heaters in this climate because the buses are too big for electric heaters. And I was like,
Yeah.
why can't you put in
You
more?
put in heat pumps. You
Like, why
put
can't
in-
you put in extra heat pumps, or why can't you heat? the
I think they
seats,
just
or-
found that it was more efficient and it, I don't know.
I know, but it was just like, I wanted to call the guy afterwards, but I didn't have his number.
I didn't know that, but that's interesting.
Yeah, they
so
got
they're
they
putting-
got a waiver from EPA to be able to use diesel powered heaters on the buses.
And it seems like if you heated the seats and you could use a couple of heat pumps.
Yeah, just put them
so
in,
you
yeah.
just Put more.
I mean, they're putting heat pumps in RVs now, trailers.
Yeah.
What's the difference in price between an EV bus and a diesel bus?
They're about twice the price at this point.
It'll come down.
It'll come down,
As the
yeah.
market transforms, it'll come down, but it's just so new.
But it's
The
the,
fuel savings are.
This is
so
why tax
high.
credits and these kind of things mean something. You get it going.
but trying to recoup some of the research and development costs and all of that.
But even with that cost, they're saying that there's cost savings even at that cost.
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing.
Well, there has to be with diesel at $6 a gallon.
Yeah, right.
I just.
The good news is the school department has a really rigorous bus replacement cycle that they really stick to. So this is not a conversation that isn't gonna come up every single year. And every year they assess which 3 buses are gonna be decommissioned and which 3 buses are gonna be purchased. So, so this isn't like we only have a couple of buses that get swapped out or, they're not in the replacement cycle. Every single budget cycle, they talk about at least 3 school buses, so.
Yeah, so the one that we rode on was heading up to Vinyl Haven. And Mount Desert Island had got one last year. I think they have another, they'll be running 2 this year. And then, like I said, Yarmouth has purchased 2 for this year. They should be delivered this fall. So, and then it's a matter, they were saying of, looking at the length of the bus routes and making sure it makes sense. And then until there's, good infrastructure in place, you're still gonna need your diesel buses to run kids to like sporting events
Sporting
and things
events,
like
yeah.
that, because they're not necessarily going to be able to charge.
It's a transition and
Yeah.
it's gonna take time. But
Start with a couple.
just think these seniors that are in high school today will see that transition. And when they start bringing their kids to
Yeah.
school,
We had to ride on these loud buses.
And they
and-
stunk, and there would be no more, the parking, the idling
The
issues that we
idling,
hear
yeah.
constantly. That,
We used to sit on the bus and we used to just run, like.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, you won't have to plug them in. The buses we have down there plug in during the winter
Yeah, they
time
heat up the-
because they have heater blocks. Block
And
heaters.
those buses can be preheated, so that you're not trying.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, they were saying that, they're all set on timers so that
All
the,
programmable.
yeah, so the drivers show up
Wow.
and the bus is already warmed up when.
That's cool.
So have you spoken to the school department after that?
I haven't had a chance to, no.
I think it's worth following up with them after that, and if you'd like me to come and meet with you, like you said, schedule a meeting.
In April, maybe you'd be interested in something like that, so.
Another thing to talk about with them is the potential for using those buses as the peak load generator in
Yeah.
the summertime, when they're not using those
Yeah.
buses.
Yeah, that's true too, because they were saying that, one of the, with one of their clients. They're right across the street from a nursing home. And when the power went down, they drove one of the buses over to power the nursing home.
Just as,
Electric bus.
as an aside, as an interesting piece of information, the United States only has a 28-day supply of diesel left.
Better hurry up. Convert to electric.
There's a significant crisis. right
Well, there's a
now
real crisis with kerosene right
For
now.
There
for
is.
lack of diesel.
Kerosene is, I don't know,
That's gonna affect home heating too.
That's everything.
For home heating, forget about, I don't know what people are gonna do with oil heat this year. It's gonna be very difficult.
not so much on the oil, but on people using kerosene. I mean, I don't know how they're gonna get it right now.
Yeah.
They're looking at,
We have kerosene for our monitor heaters and, yeah,
can't get
we,
anybody to deliver any.
no, we can now. They did get a delivery within the past like week or so. So we are on the delivery list. We use so little because, primarily heat with wood, but, yeah, it's,
You know, as a
Struggle. And it's $7 a
distillery,
gallon.
kerosene is at the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah, I know,
That stuff is garbage during World
but it's
War.
so expensive.
I
The
know.
junk is
You
expensive.
know, but during World War II, people would try to run their cars on kerosene rather than gasoline because they couldn't get it because of ration. But I think we have a real crisis right now with diesel. Hopefully it'll clear up a little bit.
Propane's not cheap. I just put propane in my tank. We only use it for cooking.
Yeah, same.
$5 a gallon.
That's still less than diesel. Right now, the fuel oil.
Well, yeah, the
$5.39 to $5.79 a gallon.
fuel oil, yeah.
Well, this
Or
would be a
next
good
quarter.
winter to be advertising.
So I think we need to do
Yeah.
some education
Great.
for our citizens.
Yeah.
I think it's our role.
Yeah.
And so let's keep that on our agendas now going forward and see if there's a way to have a webinar or a sustainability day at Scarborough, where we could bring in some of these EVs and do what Freeport did.
yeah, I would say,
There's a lot of resources that we can tap into.
there are, yeah, and if that's the route that, if this group wants to plan kind of an Electrify Scarborough Day or something like that, that's definitely something that it's gonna be all hands on deck to kind of,
We should do that and
Plan that
also
out.
get the town council to declare through a resolution that it's Sustainable Scarborough Day.
Write it up.
And then have all of these things going on. Get kids involved, the sustainability, what do they call that club at the schools?
Eagles.
The Eagles.
But you know, buying a heat pump is one thing, getting tax breaks is another thing, but getting it installed is something else again. So, I think
Create the demand, the market will
There's-
respond. There have been more training classes.
There have to be people who are running around installing these things.
My colleague goes to one of the tech schools every month and does a thing for Efficiency Maine at heat pump installation training. The classes are always full. And so the demand is there. The market is starting to recognize that. Even the governor with her community college funding, that these kids are signing up to go to SMCC left and right now, and they're going into the trades. So the market's responding.
It's such a marvelous program.
and
Yeah.
SMCC also has a program now for EV maintenance, because it's not the same as working on a conventional car, so they're trying to train the technicians.
NEMA's classes, they're always full. That's the main energy marketers.
Okay, let's do that.
I'll have one of those. One of those.
Let's do that. Is that something we should schedule for January or February, once we understand more about the?
Once we get, well, it could be right after the holidays, maybe. Because by then the tax credits will be out,
If you say Efficiency Maine is working full-time on understanding what's
what's
available,
available and everything.
can we just piggyback off of Efficiency Maine and get some of their
Well, that's what I'm
materials
thinking.
and things of that nature?
Yeah,
And
and
by then we should have stuff done in, in format where we can do education, because I know they're gonna do education.
right. I would be hesitant to schedule anything without knowing what efficiency main
That's right.
timing is, because I don't want to have to get information out and then say, oh, we're not quite ready, we need to reschedule, so.
I'm sure you're gonna hear a lot when the new legislatures convene, and now there's gonna be, laws put left and right about this and this and this, so there's a lot of action, but a lot of
That's another
energy
year
around
and a
it.
half before we then see any of that. get
Well, some of
voted.
it could be made emergency, so it's right after it's signed, so.
So we'll keep this on the radar, and hope for the spring, but maybe in January have a better idea of when.
Springtime is nice because some of these things belong outside, like
Right.
EV stuff, and you want people outside, and, we could take that, but I, don't want to confine it with like Scarborough days. That would be, we need to have a proclamation, we need to make it a big deal.
Maybe try aim for around Earth Day, yeah,
That's in April, right?
yeah, April
Yeah,
22nd.
that's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
I like that.
that gives us time.
That gives us 6
And
months.
gets the weather out. Um,
Any other new business?
That is all that I had. The only other thing that we have updates still to come, so I'll share let's talk about the next meeting date until after updates.
Okay,
So
update period.
updates, so town council, April.
The only other thing that I would put on this committee's radar, and I know Rick is involved because he's on the sustainability for the new school building, but site selection is getting really close. And so once they have the spot cited, you're gonna start having building planning discussions.
We started meeting now
Yeah,
weekly.
Weekly. The sustainability committee for the school building is meeting weekly. So,
It's actually today at noon
I was
time.
gonna say, can you share those meetings with me? I know I'm not.
I'll be happy to send the notes, the meeting notes. I will do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had our first one last Wednesday,
Okay.
and it was nice. Harriman is involved, and Harriman has now changed. RSU2 was gonna go with the geothermal system, and they're going with DRF because it's more cost effective. Variable refrigerant flow, heat pump system, not geothermal, not water source.
Yeah,
It was a huge, I spent months with that school, and now I'm working with Cape Elizabeth because they want to do something similar. It's just dynamic how.
I
the
feel like
market-
15 years ago, geothermal was all the rage, and we haven't quite gotten over that yet. To be there's more
It's because
efficient.
our architects are comfortable with that, and this is kind of new, but
and
they're
we see
starting
that
to
with
say,
our contractors as well, so there may be an opportunity to do.
yeah, I'm proud of the downs, they're putting in a lot of heat pumps in the downs. They're doing great, I just don't want them to put any more natural gas pipes in, and we want to keep that from happening. But it's really exciting.
The school selection, I'm sorry if I didn't.
It's a
get that, but-
consolidated school,
So that's definitely on the works, that's on the
Oh,
radar,
yeah.
'cause really,
they're trying to shoot for next, election for a referendum.
yeah, November 2023 referendum is the goal.
To consolidate all the K through or pre-K through. We were told by the Department of Education that we have to use pre-K through
Scarborough doesn't have a pre-K.
Through what?
through 12 is the lingo, but in this case, this school is for pre-K to 3rd grade, I think, right? To consolidate all the
And
neighborhoods
that'll
in
pull
one.
the 3s out of Wentworth and
It'll
pull
pull
the
the-
6s down to the,
Exactly.
down
Yeah.
to Wentworth.
It alleviates the pressure at the middle school, takes a grade from the middle school and puts it at Wentworth, and then takes the 3rd graders from Wentworth and puts them with the K through 2 kids.
and it closes the other
And it
elementary.
closes the other elementary schools.
Consolidate administration, all those kind of things. But they're gonna need electric buses because now they got more kids to shop around, so.
Yeah, this is
It's all good.
more travel for some of those kids.
Yeah.
All right, update, is that all you had
That's
for
all I
town
have.
council? What else?
Planning board?
Not really much. The last meeting I was in Hilton Head, so I missed that one. Not a whole lot. This agenda, not much really, anything big.
And then Conservation Commission, they have been doing a lot of, as Angela mentioned, discussing trails and trail connectivity. That's kind of been their most recent focus, in addition to the joint memo, as you all know how that ended. So, and then just working within their goal setting process and aligning their tasks with the comp plan. So that is.
On the case of the trail connectivity, one of the biggest trail development efforts is the Close the Gap effort on the
On the
Eastern
Eastern
Trail,
Trail.
and which has been going on way too long.
Sure
And
has.
It was funded years ago, and I talked to the executive director a couple months ago, and he said the biggest problem, the biggest hurdle is easements, that the land is
There's
no
one
longer
landowner
available.
that has not signed an easement yet.
So I'm wondering if, you know, I don't know if there's anything we could do as a committee to maybe relook at that and say, is there an alternative? Is there another land way
That's,
we can go? They talked about, he was also talking about building a large bridge over the railroad tracks, which I thought was, I didn't know that was needed. You know, is there a way to get across the railroad tracks that doesn't require a large bridge? And so anyway, I mean, town of Scarborough has donated a pretty sizable amount of money to that effort, to that one project.
The town manager was very optimistic at council last week that
easement,
that agreement and easement is very close to
it's
being
very
signed.
close, yeah.
Okay.
So-
Done that for a long time.
That's nice.
It's been a couple of years.
There's been positive developments on that front, so, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Right, I think we're all holding our breath until it's physically signed, but this is the closest we've been according to the town
Is
manager.
that part of?
Never been closer.
Is that what part of what Angela is doing? I mean, it's not, you know, the Eastern Trail Alliance is not part of the town, but we're interested stakeholders and we've donated money to it, so.
Yeah, so, some of the connectivity is, the transportation committee is looking at is finding safe ways for people to get to the Eastern Trail. Because, I mean, Eastern Trail runs parallel to Route 1, there's like
Be
lots,
great.
like Route 1 not bikeable,
Right.
Eastern Trail is. So
Yeah.
identifying those connection points is really important, and getting people from the western area of town east to the Eastern Trail. That's kind of some of the priorities of
Okay,
that transportation study. And yeah, then once the gap is closed, so hopefully that work will be out to bid this year. It's just a matter of getting that final easement in place, and then everything will be out to bid so that they can do the trail work. The bridge is already, like, the design work is done.
yeah,
So it's really that last piece of the puzzle that, like you said, it's been ongoing for a number of years, but there have been positive developments where that's concerned. And I think that if things weren't looking as positive as they were, it would be, you know, either back to the drawing board to figure out where the trail could go. But that was all part of the process initially, and that route makes the most sense. And it you know, it follows CMP's existing easement and things like that. So it has the least amount of impact. It keeps bikes off road.
Yep.
And things like that. So it is really the preferred route.
So now we have to talk about a meeting date because we fall into the Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so we're
holiday.
scheduled to meet the day before Thanksgiving, which I don't think anyone wants to do. So I think what we typically do is push the meeting a week, and then take December off because our meeting falls right between Christmas and New Year's. So the next meeting date, if we push it a week, would still be in November. It would be the 29th, I believe. That's the 5th Wednesday of the month, so hopefully there are no, or the 30th.
30th,
So hopefully there aren't other conflicts on the 5th Wednesday of the month, if people are open to that.
And then we leave the January meeting as scheduled.
We'll leave the January meeting as scheduled, and plan not to meet in December.
Yep, no, 30th works for me. All right,
That work for that end of the table?
super. Well, thanks, everyone. Any last minute departing words?
The only public comment at that open meeting, at the workshop, was somebody who wanted to.
Pesticides.
Somebody was working on pesticides.
It was, what's her name?
Nina McKee.
Nina, yeah.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to toss that.
yeah.
That's not us, but.
No, that is on Conservation Commission's radar.
All right,
All right.
motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, to get out to vote and make sure, because we want her back for the next 3 years doing this same committee.
You're running unopposed, aren't you?
But still get out to vote. I didn't-
Everybody's running out of posts.
So I was gonna write in, are we still recording?
I can end it.
Motion to adjourn first.
Yeah.